Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. Welcome to It's Time for More Injury Funding, the podcast for all who want to learn about legal funding and its significance in the personal injury, workers' compensation, trucking law, rideshare, dog bites, and many other types of law practice domains. I'm your host, Laura, founder and CEO of More Injury Funding, the legal funding counselors with passion for law, medicine, legal funding, and heart for all suffering individuals. In today's episode, I have an honor to be talking to attorney Mitchel Ashley, founding and managing partner at the Ashley firm, a law firm based on Broadway in New York. Today, we'll be discussing clients' legal path by selecting the right attorney and managing case expectations. At the end of our episode, I prepared a fun pop-up question, so stay tuned. Without further ado, let me introduce you to Mitchel Ashley. Mitchel, can you tell us a little bit about what made you become an attorney? How long have you been practicing law, and what types of cases do you handle at your practice?
Sure. It's funny. I did not go right to law school the way many other people do, go right from college to law school. I went to work for 3 years in a marketing company, and we specialized in what they call promotional items for the casinos in Atlantic City. And that was my career. I was a salesperson. And I got involved in high-level talks in that job, meeting with the CEOs and the presidents of the casinos. And when I was sitting in those board meetings, because we really were doing a lot of the big promotions for some of the big casinos at the time, when I was sitting in those meetings, I noticed that everyone in the room had a law degree or an MBA. And I thought, these guys must be doing something right. And so I went back to graduate school to get a law degree and an MBA. And as when you go to law school in your second year of law school, you go to work for a law firm. Well, I went to work for a personal injury law firm, and they got me involved in a case that was so significant. I fell in love with that practice. I never finished my MBA, and I just went right into personal injury law.
Well, that's a fascinating story. Amazing. Very unique. I love it. Let's start our conversation with an overview of under what circumstances a person should hire a lawyer and what that person should look for in a lawyer. In your opinion, Mitchel, what are the top three qualities a client should look for when hiring a personal injury attorney?
Sure. I think for me personally, what I'd like to know is that I'm speaking to the lawyer who's handling my case. So I would say accessibility. I once upon a time I was a partner in a firm. We had 5 partners. Every partner had a paralegal and a secretary. We had associates. We had everything. Um, but even in those days, I really always want to speak to my own clients whenever I could. I tried not to use a middle person. And then I went out on my own, and it's now really something I really like is that I speak to the clients from beginning to end, and they can always get me. And I think that if every time you call the office, you can never speak to the lawyer, I think that's a big problem. So that's one thing, accessibility. I would also say, knowledge. You have to believe that your lawyer has the knowledge to pursue your case. So, and they should be able to explain it to you and answer your questions so that you understand it. When I do depositions or when I'm getting clients ready for depositions, I do say to them, look, when they ask you a question, you may not understand it. I may understand it. I've sat through a lot of depositions. But if you don't understand it, you have to ask them to rephrase it so that you do understand it. And I think the same is true when you're talking to a lawyer. If you don't understand what the lawyer's saying to you, ask them to explain it. And they have to be able to explain it to you so that you do understand what's going on in your own case. And finally, I would say it goes along with that. The lawyer should be patient with you. Uh, the people who come to me often are relatively uneducated and have been hurt on various jobs. And, I've been through college and graduate school, so we may have different vocabularies, a lot of different things. I have to be patient with those people so I can get them to understand what I'm saying. And sometimes it has, especially when you're dealing with clients who don't speak English as a native language. You're dealing with translators. I've dealt with translators in Creole and Spanish, Hebrew, Yiddish, Russian. I'm trying to think what other, various forms of Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese. So many different languages are out there, and I've had to talk to the clients, and sometimes the translations are difficult. So the lawyer has to be patient with you. So again, you understand what's going on in your case.
Thank you for explaining this so thoroughly. With so many lawyers advertising their services, how can someone cut through the noise to find the right fit for their needs, whether it's a motor vehicle injury, trekking accident, pedestrian or motorcycle injury, or something less usual, such as maybe nail salon injury or subway accident?
Well, I've represented people in all those fields and some others, but um, look, it is no secret that in New York, lawyer advertising is everywhere. In terms of Google paid search terms, attorney search terms are the highest priced ones out there. Um, you can't turn on the television and not be inundated with advertisements. But I think people, there's a few things. One, ask around, ask friends and family who they've used, who they've had success with, who they like. Two, if you don't know anybody and you're purely doing it based on Google searches or who you saw on TV, again, if you can never talk to the name that you're seeing on TV, that I think's a problem. If someone calls the Ashley law firm, they ask for Mitchel Ashley, they get me. Now, there are times I'm not here, but for the most part, they get me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the one. And I think that's an important factor. And the other thing is when you're hiring a lawyer, a personal injury case, for better or worse, can take, usually 3 to 5 years to handle. I've had personal injury cases. They were big cases with multiple plaintiffs and complex issues of law that lasted 23 years and 25 years.
Oh.
And so it's kind of like a marriage. I mean, it's like a team sport. The client has all the information, I have the legal knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So interview the lawyers. Don't just go and sign right away and you're hired. Interview a couple, see who you feel comfortable with, see if that person has done this before, if you believe they have the knowledge to do it. Don't go by the lawyer looking on their website and saying, "Oh, they settled this case for 25 million, this one for 10 million, this one for 40 million." Look, I'm thankful to say I've had plenty of multi-million dollar settlements. I've had multi-million dollar verdicts. But every lawyer advertises that. And I can't tell you that they all tell you the truth either. So I think that's less of a factor than actually speaking to the lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are there any specific red flags that should make someone reconsider a potential lawyer?
I kind of said it, but if every time you call, all you get is the secretary, that's a red flag to me. If you can never speak to the lawyer whose picture you saw in the magazine, the lawyer who's showing up on TV, that's a red flag to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are things that you're hiring this person to represent you. You are believing this person maybe one day has to stand in court and prove your case to a jury. Well, you better be able to talk to that person to make sure they understand everything you're going through.
How important do you believe, Mitchel, is a lawyer's experience in personal injury cases, and how can clients verify this information?
Well, again, I think you have to talk to the lawyer, ask him the questions. I think, you could ask him point blank, have you handled these cases before? We don't list, first of all, it'd be an invasion of privacy to list all our cases by name, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if a client asks me, have you handled this before? I There hasn't been a situation since I mean, maybe when I was a brunette, I there were some cases I hadn't handled before, but now pretty much every time a client comes to me, I could say, yes, I've handled that before. And you could ask them, what happened, not the name of the person, but give me some details about the case so you can verify, yes, they handled this. I mean, for instance, a dog bite case. I just had one. It was an Amazon delivery person. I can tell you the facts. They went to the door, the dog came out, there were no warning signs, whatever. You mentioned nail salon. Yes, I've handled those. I can go through a plethora of different scenarios involving pretty much every topic I've encountered.
Mm. Do you believe that client testimonials or reviews play a role in the decision-making process when hiring an attorney?
That's a hard one to say because um, I've had clients who have written me glowing notes, and I have to be honest, I haven't always put them on my website, nor have I asked them to submit a Google review. I Maybe it's because I'm not so tech savvy. I just haven't done it. So I can't say, I mean, let's face it, there's a big advertiser who has people show up on the screen and says, oh, my lawyer, I was offered, $10,000, but my lawyer ultimately got me, $3 million. Well, there is no name put with that. The person you're seeing on TV is an actor, obviously, because someone who looks perfectly fine likely didn't get $3 million. That person's horribly injured. Um, so I'm not sure how much that testimonial matters. Same with a bad review. Let's face it, if you look up a restaurant, you see a lot more bad reviews than good ones. Why? Because the person who wants to leave a bad review is highly motivated to do so. And the people who, if they had great service at a restaurant, they don't write anything. So, I'm mixed on whether that testimonial is all that important.
Okay, well, interesting. Can you, Mitchell, explain the difference between a personal injury lawyer and other types of attorneys? Does specialization matter from the client's perspective when choosing the right lawyer?
Well, it's funny that you say that because uh, you have to understand the rationale behind personal injury lawyers. Um, we work on what's called the contingency model, meaning we only make money if our client's case is successful. Okay. If I take a case, even if I have it for 10, 20 years and I lose it, I get nothing. So now the reason for that was the people who are hurt often are from a lower socioeconomic class or have to go after people who are injured because of a defect in a car. They have to go after a car manufacturer. Well, they can't possibly have the money to fight that car manufacturer because the lawyers they would have to hire are going to bill them at 400 an hour, 500 an hour. They don't have the money for that fight. So the personal injury lawyer who works on contingency, they are it's done so that to even the playing field between the high powered corporate lawyer who might be representing a big manufacturer and the small little guy plaintiff who's been hurt. Because the client doesn't have to pay me. I only make the money if I'm successful, and I'm only going to pursue that case if I think the client is right, that they were injured because of the fault of somebody else. And so, I think a corporate lawyer. Now, I had a close friend who was injured in a personal injury context years ago, and he said, "Well, I went to it was the lawyer of his dad's company." And he said, well, the lawyer represented me, and he said, I can't take a fee because you were hurt. I can't make money because you were hurt, even though they settled the guy's case.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds, so great. Except, the father who was his client on a corporate level had probably paid him tens, maybe hundreds of $1,000s for his legal fees over the time. So Of course, so we represented the son for nothing. Yes, of course. Um, but I do think, you need to have lawyers who have done this before and have handled injury cases before. There are unique things to it that lawyers who practice in corporate law just aren't used to.
Mhm, mhm. Very well. Let's shift now our focus from hiring the right lawyer for a case to clients' expectations in a case. What are some common misconceptions clients have about duration of personal injury cases? And I'm sure you had quite a few of these clients that, couldn't understand how the case works or how long it will take.
Well, during jury selection, I tell the jurors, I said, please don't hold me as a lawyer to the standards that you see on TV and in movies. And I say to them, I promise you, I'll never have a witness on the stand who, while I'm cross examining them, breaks down and says, oh, it's my fault. I did it. I did it. I did it. Yeah, you get that on Matlock, the old Matlock, not the new one.
Hmm.
You get that in TV shows and movies, and in TV shows like The Practice. They get a case. A person comes into their office in the first 10 minutes of the show. They do all their investigation in the next 20 minutes of the show, and they get a jury verdict in the last 10 minutes of the show. And the client collects their money and is all happy. And all this takes place with commercials in 48 minutes. Okay. That's TV and the movies. It's not the reality. And clients who think that their cases are going to be, really fast because that's what they're used to seeing are generally sorely disappointed by the process. But I tell everybody when we meet at my initial meeting with them that especially since COVID and especially in the city of New York, where our court system was shut down for a few months. We had the jury trial system was really curtailed for, probably more than a year. Um, Things are backed up. And so from the actual, after our investigation, which could take several months, when we actually start the lawsuit to the time we tell the court we're ready to proceed to trial, could be anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So that's a year to a year and a half after our investigation. Once we tell the court we're ready to proceed to trial, depending on what county we're in, that can be another 12 to 18 months just to get a trial date. So that's another year to a year and a half. So you're looking at 3 years minimum from after your investigation. So the time the client's been with you could be 3.5 years. Now, there are some cases that move faster, but you have to be prepared for that and you have to be ready with that investment. I tell clients when I meet with them, I'm ready to put in that time and energy. You have to be ready to do that as well. And, understand that the process may take that long.
Mhm. You explained it so well, Mitchell. Thank you. Can you walk us through the typical timeline of a personal injury case from filing to resolution? And I'm not asking for the full, blown out big picture, but just kind of, just bulletin in the bulletin point fashion.
Sure. And again, it depends on the case. I mean, a typical auto case, for example, if the client comes to you with the police report, it moves a lot faster. Once you have that police report, you help the client fill out the no fault forms, you get those in, the client gets treatment. In New York, we have the threshold requirement. So you have to be sure the client's going to make that threshold requirement before you start your lawsuit. So that may require getting some medical records. But on a quick pace, you generally can get that lawsuit started within a month. The defendants then have, if they answer timely, which is, they essentially have 21 days from the time they're served to answer you. Hopefully you get their answer within 2 months. But now is when the court gets involved because you have to tell the court you're ready for what's called a preliminary conference. Just to give you an example, in one of my cases, we told the court we're ready for a preliminary conference 8 months ago. and we still don't have it.
Mm.
And that's our scheduling conference. So, as fast as I want the case to move, sometimes it's not. But if you're lucky, from the time you walk into the lawyer's office to the time you get a trial date, I would say at a minimum time is about 2 years.
Hmm. Hmm. Good to know. What are the key milestones in the personal injury lawsuit that clients should be aware of?
Sure, I think you should, if, once you're with a lawyer, you should be hearing from the lawyer when his investigation is done and he says, okay, we're starting the lawsuit. That's one milestone. You should hear from the lawyer when he gets in the answer so that there's insurance and a defense firm on the other side, because now he or she has to ask you questions for help filling out a document called the Bill of Particulars, which is another form document you must serve on the defendants. So that's another milestone, that the answer in it. And now you are firmly in the discovery phase of the lawsuit. And the next time you're going to hear from the lawyer is to schedule your deposition. What dates are you available? And then the deposition prep, and then the deposition itself. More milestones. And then the defendant's deposition. If it's a one-on-one case, meaning there's one plaintiff, one defendant, sometimes those can be done on the same day. But if not, you want to know when the defendant's deposition's done. Then typically a defendant requests you see a doctor of their choosing for a defense physical, another milestone. And then when the lawyer tells you that, okay, we're ready to proceed to trial, I filed the note of issue, then, that's yet another milestone. And now you have to wait for your trial date and your pretrial conferences in court. And you should be hearing from the lawyer along the way. What I tell clients, and I think is good practice, don't ever worry about what's going on in your case. Pick up the phone and call me or send me an email and get an answer.
Mhm.
Sometimes, nothing happens every day in a case. But if you want to call me every day, I'm happy to talk to you. But I will call you when there's things going on and we hit these milestones.
Hmm. What is a client's role in the litigation process and how they can best support their case? In addition to
Sure.
calling you and of course telling the truth, hopefully.
Well, I do trust that they will tell the truth. I admit that. Um, Look, I think one thing clients have to understand is when you hear of big verdicts, that gets publicized, big verdicts. Those happen because people were severely injured. You know, my biggest verdict to date was a man who was a walking, talking human being before the negligence of the hospital and ultimately ended up in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. You know, so one thing clients have to understand is if, you got hurt and you went to see a doctor and you saw the doctor for 2 or 3 months and then you never saw medical treatment again, your case has a certain value. I mean, if you never needed a doctor again, I think one of the big misconceptions clients have is that their case has, a certain value because their friend told them their case got this much money. If you don't treat with a doctor, your case has limited value. You can't say, well, it was still hurting me, but it just made no sense to go to the doctor. People who are hurt see doctors. Okay. So I think one thing you have to do is make sure you get the medical treatment to document your injury. Don't say, well, I just have a high threshold for pain, so I never went to the doctor. That's great, but the defendants are never going to know what your injury is if you don't have medical records.
Exactly.
So that's one thing. The other thing is, keep in touch with your lawyer. If you're going away for 2 months or you move, let us know where you go because we don't want to have to track down our own clients. In my career, it's only happened a couple of times. I had to hire a private investigator to find my own client.
Wow.
That's not so good.
Not at all. That's not good at all. And you may have touched on this already, but so of course, clients usually ask this, why some cases resolve quickly while others seem to drag on for months or even years?
Well, sometimes it's the client's choosing. Every case I have is the client's case. So, for instance, a client could be offered a sum of money early on in litigation. And I could tell the client, I don't think you should take this amount of money. But if they want to take it and end their case, it's their case. And so that's some of it. Some of it is sometimes insurance limits. I had a case, a woman was horribly hurt in a car accident, but the insurance for the other car was only $25,000. They offered the amount of money fairly quickly. There was no place else to go. They had no assets. That's how much insurance they had. So those kind of cases can resolve quickly. Sometimes, if the injuries are absolutely devastating, it's another time when cases can resolve quickly. When the liability is picture perfect, the injuries are devastating. Sometimes those cases do resolve quickly, based on, to some degree, my reputation that they know I'm going to continue fighting for this person. And to some degree, just the circumstances of the case. They want to get it over with, the other side. So they settle it quickly. And other cases, especially if liability is heavily contested, my cases that lasted for over 20 years, those were for kids who were injured as a result of exposure to toxic chemicals.
Mm.
They involve cancers and leukemias. That was a new area. It hadn't been done before. I mean, since that case started, the movie Erin Brockovich came out after my case started. The book and the movie A Civil Action was after my case started. No one even heard that this could be true. That's why that case took so long, because the liability issues were so complicated that it took many, many years to fight them out in court. And we went to different levels of our court system, the Supreme Court level, the appellate division level, and our highest court, the Court of Appeals level, to prove our point. And so, sometimes that's a reason why a case takes a long time.
Mhm. You explained it very well. Thank you. These are some great tips on what clients' role in the litigation process is. Now, let's talk about what happens if my injury puts me out of work, or worse, makes it so I cannot work again. What immediate steps should someone take in their if their injury prevents them from working?
Sure. I mean, there's a few different things. If it's a auto case, no fault will compensate you for lost wages up to a certain point. So that's good. That's why you have to get that no fault paperwork in a timely manner. In certain other cases, I have had clients who were permanently injured, who I put them in touch with disability lawyers. I don't do disability work, but there are specialists in that field to help them apply for disability, because they're going to be disabled for the rest of their lives. There are also funding companies who help clients who don't have the money and don't have the medical insurance, who help them finance surgeries they may need and possibly living expenses until their case is resolved. Those are all real world problems. Now there are people who say, look, if you can get money from friends and family, great. But if not, there are resources available to help people who are out of work. And I have had more than one client I've had to put in touch with disability attorneys to help them get set up for Social Security disability, which is going to be helping them for the rest of their lives.
How can a personal injury claim compensate for lost wages, and what documentation is required?
Sure. Well, there's a few things that go into play there. And one is, many times people have come to me and said, I'm out of work. Okay, what were you doing? I was, the counter person at a bodega. Okay, what were you making? I was making $22 an hour. Okay. Were you getting paid on the books? No, I was making cash. Okay. if you haven't been paying taxes, you can't recover for lost earnings. That is a fact of life. You've been you so that's one factor. But if you have a person who I had an employee who was working for the federal government, postal worker, who, as a result of his accident, was never able to work again. So for that person, we take their tax returns, we take their pay stubs, and we hire what's called an economist who's going to testify at trial. And in that case, we did have one who testified at trial as to what this person has lost economically from the time they were hurt up until they would normally retire. And so that's what you can do with an employee who's been working and paying taxes all these years. You submit that evidence to the jury, and ultimately the jury decides um, what to compensate them for their lost earnings and lost economic value.
What options are available for individuals who find themselves unable to return to work due to their injuries?
Sure. I mean, again, it depends on the cases, but in an auto context, they are making lost wages for a time period up. So that hopefully is compensating them. If it's a different type of case, then often we can turn to plaintiff funding companies who, will give what's called non-recourse loans so that they can earn money to, in many cases, pay rent, get food on the table, help them until their case is over. And, admittedly, you hope those kind of cases move faster because the person's out of work and we're going to hopefully recover their lost earnings in the lawsuit. But again, that could take several years. So there are resources available for people like that. And you need to be with a lawyer who, does know that there are these resources available for you.
Absolutely. Can you, Mitchell, discuss the potential long-term impacts of a personal injury on the person's career and financial stability, besides, of course, family and all other disruptions?
Sure. I mean, in cases I've had where their injury prevented them from going back to work, that is where we've had an economist testify. If the person needed special medical care, we've had what's called a life care planner testify to provide them with a verdict, hopefully, that allows them to pay for these things. And there are different ways of helping protect that money. So there are, if the person's on disability, there are special ways to protect the money for you so that you're not spending all your money when you are entitled to certain benefits from the government to get the treatment you're doing. And so again, you need a lawyer who has some experience with this so that you are protected. But all we can do in personal injury law is compensate you for the losses you've got that have occurred. And that's compensating you for your financial losses as well. So, but, again, that case is going to take years to resolve. And so if it's a short-term issue, there are, companies available who will help fund you for that. In the long term, all we can do is try and get you the compensation from the jury that you deserve.
Mhm, mhm. What role does disability insurance play in the context of a personal injury claim?
Well, you can only, there are offsets for your case. And so, if you're getting workers' comp as a result of being hurt on the job, but you still have a personal injury lawsuit, you do have to reimburse comp for the money they've spent when you were hurt by somebody else. And so there are several offsets, what they call collateral sources, that ultimately have to be accounted for. And your lawyer should be able to explain that to you at the start of the case and should be able to explain it to you. No case when it starts are you offered money right away. But so some of those conversations would be premature at the start of the case. But if money starts to be offered to settle it, your lawyer should be telling you, hey, there are these offsets involved. You're going to have to reimburse this health insurance company, which is an ERISA plan. You're going to have to reimburse the workers' comp plan. You're going to have to reimburse Medicare and Medicaid. So your lawyer better be able to explain that to you and what things you do have to reimburse and what times you don't.
What are your recommendations on how can clients best document and communicate the impact of their injuries on their ability to work?
I tell clients, I think one of the best things you can do for yourself, is uh, have a small pad on you or have a piece of paper in your apartment. And the things that you are not doing as well or can't do at all, write them down. Send me an email. Mitchell, I can no longer pick up a basket of laundry. I used to be able to. Now, I need help doing that. Little things. I had a client who told me, she was an older woman. She said, look, I can no longer lift my arm all the way up to get the stuff on the top shelf. That's an injury. And that's real world problems that the jury can appreciate. And so I think it's unnatural generally for most people to complain every minute of the day. There are some people who do it, but
There
for
are some.
most, but for most people, it's unnatural. But I think it is in everyone's best interest when they are hurt to write down the things that are different. It's the only, you have to tell me, because if you don't, I don't know it. And I can't, go down the list of every small thing. Some of them may be unique to you. One person said they could no longer really walk their dog because the dog pulling on the leash was causing them tremendous pain in their shoulder, and they couldn't do it with their left hand because their arm was too weak. They were right hand dominant. So that's an injury. I wouldn't even know about it. I didn't even know that they had a big dog. That's not something that comes up. So, I think it's in everyone's best interest to always document what's going on in their lives as a result of the injury and make sure the lawyer knows it.
What advice do you have for someone facing the possibility of permanent disability due to an injury?
Well, I think that's when we have to get in touch with disability lawyers to get you applied for Social Security disability. We do have that safety net in this country to help people. Now, it could be that ultimately your recovery is so big, you're no longer going to need Social Security disability, you know. But I think you have to get that paperwork going just in case, because we do have that safety net available for people, and there is no other system that I could tell you, well, the defendant's going to pay for your housing for the rest of your life. That's not going to happen. They may ultimately by way of verdict, but they're not just volunteering to do that.
No. Again, this was so great, Mitchell. I hope our discussion about clients' legal path by selecting the right attorney and managing case expectation was informative and educational. And as promised, here's a fun pop question for you, Mitchell. You ready?
Ready.
If you could collaborate with any figure in your industry or beyond, who would it be and what project would you tackle together?
Well, I have to tell you, I that's interesting. I mean, I collaborate with a lot of lawyers to help the clients. I collaborate with a lot of experts to help the clients, and so those are the people I like to collaborate with. I mean, in a malpractice case, for instance, there's a doctor who I worked with who I became very fond of, and we really got along great. And I talked to her a lot about different types of cases. In an automobile case where an airbag didn't deploy, there was an engineer who I became, we worked together for months and months and months. And he explained to me, I mean, all sorts of things that I never knew, what they call delta V for change in velocity, things as to why airbags should deploy, all those things that I learned for the case. Again, the collaboration has lasted. That case was 15 years ago and we still talk. And there's other lawyers. There's a lawyer I work with who helps people with disability. There's a lawyer I work with on a case where I have a judgment against a defendant. He specializes in helping us collect the judgment. So in what I do, I collaborate with a lot of different people all the time. And, generally it works out well. And there's times when I've been co-plaintiff with another person because they represent one plaintiff, I represent another against the same defendant. So those collaborations are great too, because, every lawyer does things a little different. And sometimes you learn a lot by working with other lawyers, even though they're in the same industry you are.
Mhm. That was beautiful. Uh,
Thanks.
that was an attorney, Mitchel Ashley, founding and managing partner at the Ashley Law Firm in New York. I want to thank you all for listening and watching our story today. For more tips and tricks on legal funding and personal injury law and medicine related topics, follow me, download, like, and subscribe. For It's Time for More Injury Funding podcast on several podcast platforms worldwide, and follow More Injury Funding on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, Google Business Profile, and my website at moreinjuryfunding.com. I can't wait to see you, my dear listeners and viewers, at my next upcoming episodes. Tune in soon for our next guest. Until then, be well. Thank you.
Laura, thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure talking to you. And
Same
hopefully
here.
one day we'll get to meet in person.
Absolutely.